get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Cameron Heffernan, founder of Your B2B Marketing.co. And Cameron, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And we were chatting before hitting record of Cameron loves Dan Sullivan, Benjamin Hardy books. So we're going to talk about some of his favorites. So some of the past guests who are authors, we had Gino Wickman, who wrote Traction, founded EOS. That was a great episode. Mark Winters co-authored Rocket Fuel with Gino Wickman. That's a really good one. The Visionary Integrator. I had one of my favorites of all time, Chris Voss of Never Split the Difference, one of my favorite books. And there's many, many more. And Cameron, some of your favorites.
Well, I think the Dan Sullivan sort of trilogy with Ben Hardy is up there. One that we had read with my group last summer was The Good Life, which is a combination of work life and how it all integrates and comes together. One that was sitting right here is The Six Thinking Hats, which I enjoyed, and it's a short, easy read, but it makes you look at how you do thinking and how you execute this decision-making process. It was another good one.
Who wrote that one?
That is Edward de Bono.
Okay. Six Thinking Hats. Hopefully it's on Audible. I added to my list. So thanks. So check out more episodes on the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And we do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Cameron, we call ourselves the magic elves that are running the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can develop amazing relationships, create great content, and run their business, most importantly. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com to learn more. And I'm excited. And thank you to Ashton Moore, who kind of informally introduced us via EO Group. He runs Model B, and as Cameron said, also a lot of bars and restaurants too.
That's right.
Right, Cameron. So Cameron Heffernan, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's lived and worked on 3 continents, launched a 7-figure marketing agency with clients all over the world, which we'll see that's kind of his special sauce and his specialty. Cameron founded Your B2B Marketing.co, which is globally focused strategic marketing agency. So it helps companies better articulate their value proposition to support their growth and their new market entry. And Cameron, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
We'll dig into the continents thing, but just tell people a little bit about Your B2B Marketing.co and what you do.
Sure. Your B2B Marketing is a strategic communications and marketing agency that helps global businesses scale. And maybe to start with the last part first, I mean, if any business wants to grow, I think that's obvious. I think with a lot of mid-market companies, B2B companies in particular, there's maybe a deficit there in knowing, well, what do we need to do from a marketing perspective? We're really focused on product development or operations or building and growing the team. But where should we start with the marketing and communications to make it clear what we do that's different, special, unique? We had talked about the Dan Sinclair books. I think the last one that I had read was 10x is easier than 2x, right? And then there.
So Dan Sullivan co-authored with Benjamin Hardy, that one, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And they talk about what is your unique ability and really applying that to entrepreneurs, to founders, to owners of companies. And there's a whole section, a whole chapter about that. I think that also applies to companies. And I think that our job as, the marketing agency is to really help them to identify what is their secret sauce, what's their, their superpower, and to then articulate that.
Love it. Yeah, totally. And so I want to get a little granular with this before we dig into, because there's several companies you helped, you branch out into different markets in different countries, which is not an easy feat to do. And we mentioned the working on 3 continents. I know you did a lot of work in Europe and in Belgium. What brought you there?
I was managing PR and communications for a Fortune 500 staffing company in the West Coast. I needed somebody to come and run the communications and marketing function in Europe for, I think, 11 countries, 7 languages, something like that. So they sent me over to do that. And that was 2008, 2009, bad timing in the economy. But I managed to stay in Europe and did some communications consulting work there. And that led to me then founding and starting my digital agency when I got back to the US.
So when you first started, what services, because you could do a lot of different types of services.
Yeah.
What were the services you decide to lead with coming out of the gate?
I think, if I could go back and do that part of my life over with the knowledge I've gained since then, it would make it a whole lot easier. I just kind of went with what I knew. My background, my training, I was a journalist. I worked in technology journalism in the West Coast, and that's where I kind of came from. The world changed so much since then, but I feel a lot of those fundamentals are still what we do every day and what we should be doing. Storytelling, identifying with your audience, and focusing on what's important and relevant to them rather than what matters to us or to the client. And if as marketers, if we can crack that nut, we're well on our way to a successful program. I think at the time, I was kind of an accidental entrepreneur. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of went with it. And one day I woke up, hey, I've got all these people working for me, and I've got a 7-figure agency. How did that happen?
What were some of the things you put in place to grow it? Because I feel like there's a lot of accidental agency owners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. I think I was focused a lot on business development, finding who are the companies that we know need our solution, reaching out to them. A lot of it was referral and word of mouth. I then learned how to do a more deliberate sort of proactive business development strategy. Another book that I should mention is Predictable Revenues. I'm a big believer in that approach. He was the guy who at the beginning was instrumental in Salesforce and how it grew and their marketing and their outreach approach. And that concept of predictable, regular, consistent marketing and sales, I call it a flywheel, that we know these inputs that we're going to go and develop and build, and these will be the outputs we can get from that. It's not going to happen right away, but over time, if we follow those steps, these things will happen, within this range of certainty. And I think at the beginning, I didn't have a handle on that. I think a lot of what we do as entrepreneurs is, and marketing too, actually, is let's try something out. Let's iterate. Let's see what works. In the 10X is easier than 2X book, they talk a lot about the courage to fail, to try things. And, entrepreneurs gain a lot of battle scars from things that they did and didn't work out. And how many things that we've, rather than seeing that as a failure and a flop, and I should not be doing this, as an incentive to, hey, that's a great learning experience.
How did you come to the niche that you serve? Because again, with what you do, you can serve a lot of different niches. So talk about the niche that you decide to go after.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something that I would say to my clients or prospects every time that we meet with them and look at. There are a lot of companies that do X. Right here I am now in Central Ohio. There are many companies that are digital media marketing, multi-channel agencies. So we're never going to be successful. I feel this, and I say this to my team. We're never going to be successful just being another agency, another company that makes vanilla ice cream. Even if it's a really good vanilla ice cream, there's still a lot of companies that are doing that. A lot of agencies that can do exactly what we do. So I feel it's better. And again, this is right out of the 10X book and platform, is let's focus on the 20% that we do really, really well. Okay, what's our special, unique ability? What is our superpower as a team, as an agency? Let's focus on and develop that. That book starts with him talking about how Michelangelo, didn't just go build David right from scratch. There are other things he did first, and a lot of work and effort that he did to learn what his expertise, where it lie. And I feel that that's what if we're doing it well, that's what we're doing. We're really leaning into where are we different, special, and unique. And that is working across borders, the knowledge of working in Europe, helping B2B companies from outside of the US to either get a foothold here to enter the US market for the first time, or to do what they're doing here and grow. Some of our customers that are based in Europe, they've got more of a, maybe a sales function or a managing director with a limited operations team. They don't have the marketing, they don't have the communications. So I feel that our ability, our strength is to say, give us the keys to the marketing communications car. Let us handle that. You go and focus on business growth, working with and mentoring your team, and we'll handle that outreach. We'll make sure that your messaging is on point, that your messaging is directed to the people who really will benefit from your unique ability as a company.
What type of companies are those typically?
I guess one common thread for my client base currently is that concept of either wanting to reach or work across borders, whether they're in the US and they have either operations in another region of the world like Latin America, or they're based in another continent, say Europe or Asia, and they want to have effective communications and marketing strategy here. So just like if you were to launch a new business, you wouldn't just, let's say that you're based in Europe, and you wouldn't just, even if you're in Ireland or the UK, it's not a language thing, but it's really about, you're going to start in a new country. You have no credibility. You don't have the team that's on the ground that knows that market. So the best thing is that you would be doing as a starting point is looking at who do we need there on the ground that knows the US market, and let's work with those people. Just the same as if I were to enter Europe for the first time, how different it would be. GDPR, 22 some odd nation states in the EU. That was one of the biggest differences that I encountered when I worked there. Right from the outset are the languages, right? Belgium alone is the size of Maryland. It's a tiny country, but they have 3 official languages there. Okay. And one of the reasons I was brought over, because my English communication skills, which isn't really enough to build a career on in this country, but I think it was essential to languages there are something you have to deal with right out of the gate, and not something that we're used to here, unless you're in a specialized business or a bilingual kind of business. It's not something you have to navigate. There, it's clear from the outset.
When you describe it, for some reason, it pops in my head that it's a lot of manufacturers that would move. Is that accurate? And are there other types of genres of business that you tend to work with that are moving, going international?
Yeah, I mean, we do have clients in that space. We've got a couple clients that do either manufacture, they make their own products or components, or service providers to the manufacturing sector. So we do have clients in that space. Pharmaceuticals as well. We've done work there with clients that do contract drug manufacturing, which is still another side of manufacturing, not the same as industrial manufacturing, but that concept of a product. With the services providers, I still feel that with those kinds of companies, the challenge is more because you don't actually make anything. So your content, your marketing, your programs, your campaigns need to be related to the value add that you bring, your knowledge, your thought leadership, talking about trends. Why would you come and work with us when there's X number of other service providers? No one makes or does anything that's completely unique. Even Tesla has companies that are now doing something similar. I'm seeing more of Polestar these days and looking at how is that different from Tesla. No company is the only company that does that.
What are some, I'm sure that people come to you and some are proactive and some are not proactive, and they've tried going into these markets and it's not worked. So what are some of the mistakes you have seen that people make when they try to go international?
One would be doing what we're doing here. Let's take the example of an American company that wants to do more in Europe. Doing exactly what we're doing here and thinking it will work and apply for the European market. Not working with local talent. So the first thing that I would do if I was setting up a company in Western Europe, find someone, again, who, not how, from that book, find someone or a group or a team, an entity there that already is positioned and knows the European market, knows those challenges, knows the market preferences and desires. It's most tangible when you think of B2C types of companies. So kind of take that same mindset and apply it to a B2B environment. I remember when I was first in Belgium, little things that would be different that would get, trip you up. Stores are not open very late, 6 or 7 in the evening, you're done. Banks are not open at lunchtime. It's become more common now recently with Aldi and Lidl being in the US. But the first time I was in those stores, I wasn't used to bringing my own bag or having to put the euro coin into the trolley. So again, little small examples from a B2C environment. When you think with a B2B business, how could this being different affect what we do, what we deliver? Your value proposition has to be kind of tailored for that market.
Yeah, I could see how, let's say someone opened a grocery chain from the US to where you were, and they're expecting it to be open at 10 or 11 at night. It may be hard to get a workforce to stay there because that's just not what they're used to there.
Right. And, it does work. I mean, I remember I was living in DC, Virginia area, and there's a popular hamburger chain called Five Guys. And Five Guys eventually went to a franchise model. It was all over the world. And I saw Five Guys either in France or Belgium. I thought, oh, that's really strange. But it worked, because the model was so simple. People loved it, and it just expanded and grew. So it's a great way to organically grow your business. A lot of companies think, well, we're either going to acquire something or we're going to just keep doing what we do better and more efficiently. Going overseas is, again, right out of the 10X sort of playbook, is a way to step up, do something different, unique, and you're growing your business in the way that your competitors might not have thought about.
Let's talk about an example of how this plays out and what your recommendations were. There was a company in Mexico that you did some work with.
Yeah, that's a longtime client of mine. I worked with them with my previous agency and still are working with them currently. They're a services provider, so they don't do manufacturing themselves, but their clients do. And they specialize in the sort of the mid-market space for manufacturing, which can be a huge range. You can still be an $80 million company within that size range. And what we did, I don't want to give a number because it dates my age, but I would say a few years back, we looked at their outreach and we looked at their website and their materials and thought it's too much focus on what we're trying to convey and express. Remember the book, Gary Vee's, one of the first books is Jab, 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 Right Hook. When that ratio was very deliberate, it's give, then ask. A 3-to-1 sort of mix. You want to give more information and knowledge and expertise, then you're asking for someone to buy your book or go to your webinar or buy your widget. So we kind of overhauled their communications in that vein. Everything was about the pain points of mid-sized manufacturers. Many companies, and now it's even more acute with the China situation and global trade and all those different things. But a lot of European and American companies wanted to have a presence in Mexico to shorten the supply chain, to realize these cost savings, and to not have to mess with some of the challenges in China. But it's hard to do it if you're a mid-market company, to do it on your own, because you don't know what you're doing there. It's the first time you're in the country. The cost to start up is significant. So you go with a service provider that can help facilitate that transition. What we did with my client was to help articulate the relief to those different pain points, white papers, materials about that transition, about what can happen if you don't know what you're doing, about the length of time it can take you, about violations you can get if you haven't figured that out. And again, focus on common emotional pain points of those companies and how our clients solved them. So we turned around all of the pieces, the outreach, the website, into customer focused, into solution that my client offered to those common pain points. The next year, and partly also due this to timing of the market, the economy, et cetera, but for the first time, they got 3 new clients in a year. Typically, a great year was 1 new client because they're not a huge company. but there are big investments for mid-market sized companies to make, multiple millions of dollars over a many-year period. So that was a good win.
That's pretty huge.
Anyway, they were happy with it. We were happy with it.
So a lifetime value client for them is in the multiple millions.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And it was also that I think it also reinforced the concept of this is the pattern. This is the approach we're going to do going forward. I'm a big fan of set it and forget it. Yeah, you got to go back and iterate and tweak and refine. But if you can set up a true sales and marketing flywheel, that things are happening, it's predictable number of leads and prospects coming into the funnel. It's much better for everybody, for planning, for budgeting, for the team, and it's a real win.
I can see, Cameron, how you focus on the pain points, the emotional pain points, the messaging, and creating these assets that can be deployed. What are some of the levers you pull to get them out into the world to get exposure for the company?
I think it depends on a lot of factors. We'd always start when you engage with a prospect of, what are your goals? We would work with them to understand those goals. What are the KPIs and metrics that we need to put in place to achieve them? What does success look like to you? We would also evaluate where they're at now. Is their messaging clear? Is their value proposition clear? Do people understand what they're offering? And we would look at, do any of those need to be modified, evaluated, improved? And then we're almost always going to do a multi-channel approach. I love doing conferences and events. I think that these days in marketing, there's value there because so many companies have shifted to a full digital approach. There's still a value in being on the ground, meeting with prospects. We try to tee up as many meetings ahead of time as we can. Just think of the team as they travel. One of my clients has a conference coming up next month in Europe. 3 or 4 people out of the office for a week, heading over there. It's a big investment. So we want to do all we can to set up meetings ahead of time to ensure that the right people coming to meet too. And so not everyone wants to or has the appetite to do events and conferences. So we would make a mix of things that are tailored for the client. I think you've probably worked with more B2C companies than I have. The marketing and the outreach efforts are going to be different between the two sides. I think B2B companies can learn a lot from what B2C companies do. They're typically have bigger budgets, better known brands, better, longer track record brands that people have heard of. Can we apply any of those campaigns, approaches, ideas to a B2B landscape? So whether it's, LinkedIn, email marketing, cold email, warm email, collateral. So much these days, relies on the social proof that you have. A stat that I love to try out is that by the time people have made their buying decision, 70% of people have already decided they want to purchase a certain thing. That's when they go out and start to look at what they want to buy, right? So what's the last thing you've purchased, the last technology purchase you've made, Jeremy?
Probably an iPad.
Okay. Well, you know what you wanted, but you probably did some figuring on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wanted somebody to take notes on. Like I'm taking notes right now on this. And I'm a high fact finder. So I actually looked at a bunch of options, not just an iPad, which is the Remarkable. People recommend the Remarkable and saw other stuff. But I went with the iPad and the Apple Pen. So
yeah, I've got an Apple Pen. I've got the same device. I'm nerdy about this stuff. I'll spend time just poring over. My son just bought some not AirPods, but they were JBL sort of competitor. Let's try those out. If you lose them, it's not as costly. We did research. We spent time on it. And I think companies that don't consider that, or they have almost a non-existent, digital footprint, or the website that doesn't really convey what they do, are, they're doing themselves a disservice.
100%. You mentioned conferences and events. I'm sure you do a lot of advising on that realm. What are some of the mistakes people make that people who work with you probably you help them navigate around those, but that you've seen people make over and over again when doing those, because it is a big investment?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Assuming that people understand what you do and what your value proposition is. And I think it doesn't just relate to conferences and events. You think I always use this metaphor of When you're driving down a freeway at 65 miles an hour and you see a billboard, that's the level of simplicity I want in our materials, whether it's above the fold on the homepage, whether it's a banner at a show, a simple brochure, a digital ad, whatever it might be, that level of simplicity that I could explain it to someone who has never been to this industry before and is going to get it. And so messaging needs to be simple, and again, has to tie to what is their pain point. So companies that don't understand or know their targets, their prospects, that's also a challenge. Not fully understanding the needs that your buyers have, your potential buyers.
Are there any favorite, when you talk about this, and I geek out on copywriting and direct response because it goes back to the fundamental of messaging and speaking to the customer and the pain points of that customer. Are there any resources or people that you've studied throughout the year, whether it's direct response copywriters, marketers, who do you like, and who have you learned from?
I think there's a couple. I think the story brand approach, Donald Miller in his books, and he built a whole industry around that. And that's really outward focus on the pain points. People care about their own emotions so much more than anyone else's emotions. I mean, that sounds really simple, but keep that in mind. And I try to then challenge the team when we put something together. Does that satisfy that requirement? Have we addressed the reader's pain points? You look at it on a B2C landscape, it's really simple. You got thirst, get a Coke. Dinner time, go to Pizza Hut. And because they're simpler needs, but how can we apply these to a business sort of a B2B environment? Fear of failure, inability to grow your business, lack of clarity in what you're doing, all things that we should address from our solution, but you focus first on the pain.
How do you, going back to the agency part for a second, you have, I think, virtual teams, right? How do you navigate and create a culture with the virtual team that you have?
Yeah. Good question. I think with my last agency too, that was part of the equation from the beginning. So we'd been doing that and it wasn't foreign to me. So I just kind of went with it. And that's what we do now. We get together. We had our last strategy planning meeting was in September. We get together 3 or 4 times a year. We're going to do a brand workshop in December. I've got one teammate who's in South America, so she'll join us remotely. But the others, they come into town and we get together for a couple of days. And I look at it like we would be spending more time regularly if we were in the same place. So I try to, replicate that environment as much as I can. And talk about a divisive issue. I mean, it's like pineapple on pizza. It's some people, myself and older people, really value, hey, be in the office, be together, build that cohesion. Younger generation, it's a harder thing to sell and to persuade on. There's value in both. I do love a hybrid environment. And so I try to give a little bit of both to my team.
So one thing you do is you'll meet a couple times a year, actually in person. What do you do from a virtual perspective? Like, what does the weekly meeting cadence look like? What do you do on a weekly or monthly basis when you are virtual? It's
similar to an EOS kind of approach. We do an L10 meeting. We just had it earlier this morning. So we get together once a week with that L10 meeting, kind of step through it. And we haven't implemented traction or anything like that, but we're doing some of the steps. And then we have a sort of shorter, we call it a stand-up meeting, because you're supposed to be, it's short enough that you can stand through the whole thing, later in the week on Thursday. And my team is now small enough where I'll go to them and say, guys, what do you want to do? What works for you? And I think there's little things that we can do as agency owners that the team really values that aren't a huge cost or on a monetary cost that are really valued. So I think that, and they wanted to add another meeting. They wanted to add a longer sort of strategic brainstorm meeting. So we're going to do that once a month too.
Got it. Yeah. So you'll go to them, but there's a daily stand up. You have a level 10 meeting. If people don't know what that is, there is Gino Wickman. There's a video online that explains actually everything that you do in a level 10 meeting and setting rocks, et cetera. So you can check that out. I want to talk about another example. So we talked about Mexico. There's another client in Austria and some of the things you did with them.
Sure. That was an interesting client. In some ways, that's a good, almost like a poster child sort of client for us. It came through, a lot of people are really down on LinkedIn as a channel. I can understand why. I totally can. But also like email marketing. You and I have talked about this, how terrible email marketing can be. So if you do it with any amount do it somewhat decently, you kind of stand out, right? So I had reached out to somebody on LinkedIn, and he got back to me, and it kind of just evolved from there. His company is based in Austria. They make Internet of Things sensors, and we hit it off. He's in Chicago. He's got a sales team, but he doesn't have marketing. He doesn't have communications. He has a challenge where he is not the top focus of the European headquarters. So to him, we give a good solution where he has access to the whole team. It's not just me. In fact, I do very little hands-on with that client. The team really runs it. But that's one of those things, if you're looking at, should I work with an agency or should I just go to hire somebody? There's pluses and minuses of both. With an agency, you get access to a more senior person, more experienced, hopefully guiding the strategy. And you have a whole team of people that's supporting them. So that might mean you have a copywriter at your disposal, someone who knows ads, someone who could do video, someone who's doing more long form copy. A whole team to build that would be cost prohibitive. And you probably couldn't get it at one entry level or one mid-career person to do all those things. So that's a nice advantage of working with an agency. That they can also pull in their expertise, successes, learnings from other clients and bring those into the equation. Hey, should we consider this? We did this with a similar client and it worked. Maybe we should look at tailoring that for you.
What were some of the things that they were coming to you that they wanted?
I don't know about you, if this is a common thing that you guys hear, but oftentimes when we work with clients, they'll say, you're the marketing agency, you guide and direct us. And that's a great thing to hear because it means they're showing they understand the confidence in us and they're going to give us at least somewhat autonomy to go and try stuff. And I'll be honest too and say, marketing is not, in advertising, you place an ad and it runs and it's out there. We don't know what's going to happen. So in some ways, marketing is similar, but we don't know what's going to work. So I'll always say, let's try A, B, and C options or versions. Let's iterate. Let's try what worked. Let's try different things out. Let's not be afraid to see something that didn't work. So with them, we proposed their audience is engineers, very wonky sort of technical audience. So we did a couple of white papers. We built a couple of decent media partnerships with very esoteric kind of publications that were fruitful. And that's a nice pattern that I like to do too. I know that world from my past in journalism and was a good fit with the readers. And as long as the content is valued, as long as the content really has interesting, good takeaway.
Yeah. Cameron, first of all, I have one last question before I ask it. Just thanks for sharing your journey, your stories, and I love your global perspective because at least for me, I'm always locked in thinking US and there's a big world out there. And you help people kind of navigate that big world. And so I want to encourage people to check out your B2B, that's B with the number 2, B marketing.co and learn more about what Cameron's doing. My last question, Cameron, you mentioned a lot of great books, which I'm definitely going to check out. So thanks for sharing those. My last question is about, there's valuable groups. One of them being EO. We're both in EO. What are some takeaways that you've gotten from EO and being in a group of like-minded entrepreneurs?
I've gotten so much out of being in EO. I joined in 2019. It's other people who know what you're dealing with, who can identify with struggles that you're facing, and people who have overcome what you're now struggling with at the moment. You can go to them, and it's a very open and accessible community. It's a great way to get insights or suggestions or tips. People in EO don't give advice. It's about sharing experiences. So I've seen that this has worked. I have seen that didn't work. Yes, you can get new business from it, but it's not about that. It's about a community that understands where you're coming from, can help each other out, and sort of has been there before. So I found it a fantastic learning experience. I think in the last couple of years, I've really committed to ongoing learning. You're always got to be focusing and iterating and improving and trying to do better.
Love it. Cameron, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out your b2bmarketing.co and more episodes of the podcast. And thanks, Cameron. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jeremy. Really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.